The Toronto Blue Jays offense has been a big problem all season long for them, and the lack of power in that lineup has been a big point of discussion for them all year long as well. Now, this is a team that is used to being at the top when we're looking at home run numbers, at slugging percentages, and they just have been kind of middle of the road thus far. And that'll happen when you trade a middle of the order bat like Teoscar Hernandez. But something needs to change, and they need to add some thump into that lineup. So we'll break down this potential trade and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. Rough loss yesterday for the Toronto Blue Jays. It was looking pretty good there early on, but the ultimate difference, they can't slug the ball out of the ballpark. They got a couple of big hits with runners in scoring position yesterday, and they got one extra base hit in the game, I believe, by Bo Bichette, and then the rest were pretty much singles. So something needs to be added to this lineup to give them another dimension, because right now Vladdy is on pace for, I think, 21 home runs for the rest of the season. So yeah, something's got to change in this lineup, but the Jays hopefully could start to turn the corner here.
Yeah, they scored 7 runs but lost. It seems like the days where the pitching is great, the offense is non-existent, and then obviously when the offense is great, the pitching does bad. And that's the story of the Blue Jays season. But make sure to hit the subscribe button before we get into it on the road to 7,500. And let's go over a couple of key names that have been linked to the Blue Jays. The first one here is one that, Peter, you've discussed with me off camera before. He is he's a big power hitter and a prolific power hitter that the Blue Jays could trade for to inject some thump into the lineup. And like you said, we need a guy, a right-handed hitter in the middle of that lineup who hits for power. It was supposed to be Vladdy. That's not happening this year, and or at least so far this year. I think he still has a chance to do it, but you can pause the video and read this if you want. The guy we are talking about is Jorge Soler, and the next screenshot will show you a potential kind of trade or a direction the Blue Jays could go about that. But like you said, the Blue Jays only rank 13th in the MLB with home runs, and obviously it would be great if the Blue Jays could add a potent bat that could deliver the odd big blast, which is funny to say because coming into the season we figured we'd be one of the teams with the higher home run numbers, but it's not the case, unfortunately. And you see at the bottom, an ideal power hitting candidate the Blue Jays can pursue is Miami Marlins outfielder / DH Jorge Soler, which is also convenient timing considering that he's going to, we're playing the Marlins tonight, and although the Marlins are currently in contention, don't let the record fool you as they've been floating around 500 for most of the season, and that they will most likely be sellers by the time the trade deadline comes by, and we'll go over some of his stats and stuff like that. But first, what are your thoughts on Jorge Soler, given what they said? We definitely need a power hitter. He's having a great season, a 148 OPS right now. And Jays have been linked to him before in previous years, but have never gotten it done. Maybe this will be the year that they add a big boost to their lineup to help the pitching staff.
Yeah, he's a 40 home run hitter through and through, and kind of an all or nothing type of approach for Jorge Soler. I mean, he either goes yard or he strikes out, but he's done really well this year in that Marlins lineup. Of course, he's got some more protection with Luis Arias in that lineup as well. Brian De La Cruz has been swinging a pretty hot bat, and they've been playing really good baseball. And I think I'm going to disagree with the article here and say that I don't think the Marlins are going to be sellers at the deadline. Their pitching is so good, and they have some decent hitters in that lineup, enough to scratch a few runs that they can win games with the kind of pitching staff that they have. So I don't believe that they're going to be sellers at the deadline, but Jorge Soler would be a perfect addition to the Toronto Blue Jays team. And I mean, there's a few other options out there on the market, but none with the firepower that Jorge Soler possesses in that bat. He's super accomplished, playoff proven as well, and would definitely help this lineup. But the bottom line is your best guys got to be your best guys. And right now, Vladdy, if he's going to end the season with 22 home runs or 25, it's not good enough out of him. If George Springer is going to have an OPS under 800, it's usually not good enough for him. No. So guys got to play like they're expected to play, and then all the other pieces are going to fall into place. But yes, Jorge Soler would be a pretty big pickup for this team.
Yeah, and maybe it'll depend a lot on what the Marlins decide to do. If they lose the next however big stretch before the deadline, then maybe they'll probably will sell. But like you said, they've been playing very, very well, and maybe the Jays could sweep them in this series and kind of help let them decide their way here. But again, with assets going the other way, you can look at this article. This is about pieces going back, so they don't really have a solution at first base. They have third baseman Gene Segura. So the article suggests something around, package around maybe Spencer Horwitz or Santiago Espinal that could land on the power hitting Soler. And that would make a bit of sense. Obviously, open up some playing time for both of those guys, specifically Espinal. Obviously, Horwitz is with the Blue Jays right now, hit a phenomenal game yesterday. I'm sure he'll get some more, playing time there. But overall, it could be solid. Looking at his, baseball savant page this year and his stats in general, he already has 20 home runs, which is crazy, and 919 OPS. He already has the amount of home runs that Vladdy is, predicted to have the rest of the year, and he would be a phenomenal hitter. I don't see any regression. He's always been a power hitter, and he would be perfect. But any quick final thoughts? Let's hope the Marlins are sellers, and again, hopefully we can maybe sweep them and help push them towards a direction, but he would be an ideal fit, and I don't think it would take too much to get him if they do end up selling. Probably Santiago Espinal and assume a prospect of some sort.
Yeah, well, they're loaded in the pitching department, so you could rule out any pitching prospects going the other way. The Marlins need hitters, and unfortunately, Espinal, the way he's been playing, I don't think that's going to be enough to get a deal done there. Maybe a higher end prospect like an Aurelvis Martinez going the other way would help entice the Marlins, just because they do need some power in that lineup, and they have a few contact hitters, a few speed guys, but not much power. And if you take away Jorge Soler from that lineup, then they're pretty destitute in that department. So I don't know. I would love to have Jorge Soler on the team, but I just don't think it's realistic, but not where the Marlins are at right now, in my opinion. But I think this next target that we're going to discuss is maybe a little bit more reasonable and could help just as much.
Yeah, that is Lane Thomas Hall. Similar names there, sharing the name Thomas. But he tweeted about it a couple of days ago, saying a potential Blue Jays trade target is hitting 287. You can look at all this 119 WRC plus. And the big thing here is Lane Thomas absolutely mashes lefties. He hit a homer off Sandy Alcantara, who hasn't had a great season whatsoever. But he mashes lefties, and this guy, like you said, is definitely a potential better fit. He's more likely to be traded than Jorge Soler is. Obviously, Soler is probably, he has more power and he would be a more, seamless fit. But Lane Thomas, looking at his stats here, he's with the Washington Nationals. They're surely going to be sellers. He's always, Lane Thomas has always hit in his career. And this year, it's a big, I guess a bit of a breakout year for him with a 128 OPS plus with 11 home runs. And he was an everyday player for the Nationals last year. Peter, the Nationals are going to be selling. We know that for sure. The question is what it would take to get him. We're assuming, probably a higher tier prospect than you'd think Soler is. But what are your thoughts on Lane Thomas?
Yeah, the one thing about Lane Thomas is that his defense it's atrocious. Like, it's very hard to run him out there in the outfield, and it's a big reason why he's on the Nationals and he's not on a better team. But if you do bring him to the Toronto Blue Jays when Brandon Belt gets back, are you going to DH Lane Thomas over Brandon Belt? I'm not quite sure. So it's all about finding a fit for these guys that you are going to go out and acquire. But he's a pure hitter. He's got an OPS over 800. He would slot in pretty well to that lineup. Definitely a middle of the order type of bat. And man, yeah, that would help. It would help a lot. I don't know if it cures the Blue Jays' offensive struggles of the season, but it would definitely be a huge add to this team. It's just finding a place. Where do you put Lane Thomas? Do you play him ahead of Dalton Varsho? Do you play him ahead of Brandon Belt in the DH spot? I'm not quite sure. So you got to find a fit for him.
Yeah, and again, a lot of that probably depends on the internal injuries of Brandon Belt and of Alejandro Kirk as of yesterday. And touching back on Jorge Soler here, you can touch on his defense isn't the greatest either. He's mainly playing DH. So you'd also have to talk about the fit with him there as well in the lineup. But again, we just need something in the lineup to give a bolster, and that's what the trade deadline is for. It's to get new guys to come in and hopefully boost the Jays lineup. The pitching isn't really an issue right now. It's still an issue as a whole, but the bullpen has been struggling a little bit. But the starting pitching has been there. So if we can get some offense, that would hopefully turn the Jays season around like it did way back in 2015 after the deadline when they went on a tear. But any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I don't think this team has too many holes. I just think it's a very simple solution. You got to play a lot better than you've
I
played,
agree.
and they were they have the same record this year that they did in 2015, or maybe they were separated by
Similar,
one game
similar.
at the same stage of this season of the season. Sorry, they had the same record as they do now that they did at this time in 2015. So as we all remember, in 2015, that team went on a pretty special run. So it's all about hitting your stride. You got to start playing better. Your best players got to be your best players. It's the end of that.
Yeah, and hopefully they can do that. But that'll wrap up the video. Hopefully the Jays can win tonight. They have a bit of an easier part of their schedule. And the Yankees losing a lot. The Houston Astros banged up. It's the Jays' time to make up some ground. But that'll wrap up the video. Thank you guys for watching. See you tomorrow.